Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I'm going to talk about One Punch Man. And also I've got a new tie. The old one was starting to get a little old, a little bit ragged around the edges. It needed to be replaced, sadly. Goodbye old red tie, hello new silver tie. Yes. So, anyway, One Punch Man. We can talk about One Punch Man. We did a parody of One Punch Man recently. And I believe that we're going to keep doing parodies of shows kind of going on in the future, shows that we watch and shows that we enjoy. But I've talked before in the past about how YouTube is really strange in how it promotes material, but basically, like, they won't promote original content unless there's sort of already a fan base surrounding it, or you've got to be able to advertise and get people to your stuff. Maybe through Twitter you might go viral, it's hard to say. But YouTube itself is really bad at advertising original content. In fact, I talked to a guy not too long ago who worked with Frederator, and he seemed like really super disappointed with YouTube as a platform. You see a lot of animators who kind of talk about this, and they say like, well, I really want to do cartoons, but the only thing that gets promoted is like stuff that people already know. So like reaction videos, you get those guys who get millions of subscribers, and the reason is because people look up what they already know. So like, for example, One Punch Man brought in like 50,000 hits, and to be honest, it's certainly not like the highest skill thing that we've done. It was short, it was like 2 minutes, the scripting was fairly simple, but it brought in 50,000 views because people are looking up like One Punch Man, it's hot, and they come and they see it and they say like, oh, One Punch Man spoof, like I'll watch a One Punch Man spoof. And we legitimately really like One Punch Man, and I'll get into that. But going forward, though, we're probably going to start to do just more general parodies of stuff that we like, because that'll get people onto the channel, and it's probably the cheapest and most effective way that we can do it. We'll keep going with our original things and the other stuff that we do. But, parodies, people look up parodies, Google directs people to parodies. I don't know, this is why Google is such a weird platform, and why they so frequently get sued for copyright infringement is because weirdly enough, the biggest thing that they're ever going to promote is probably copyright infringement. That's always going to be the thing. Reaction videos one day are going to get caught, but if YouTube keeps promoting stuff the way it does, then, the next big thing is also going to be some bizarre copyright things. I don't know, YouTube's strange. Anyway, that said, One Punch Man. I mentioned that we actually really did like One Punch Man. I've mostly just seen the anime. I've seen a little bit of the original comic, but One Punch Man, the anime, is based on a comic written by a guy going by the pseudonym One, or possibly... Yeah, or One. It's just O-N-E. And it's really not like a very well-drawn comic, but it was really popular, and it goes on for quite a while. And because it got so popular, another artist, like a professional artist, came along and said, hey, do you mind if I start doing this in like a professional format, and I distribute this as like an official anime sort of deal? And they got started doing that, and then eventually they produced an anime out of the whole thing. So One Punch Man was originally a comic. It was a manga. Now it's an anime. It's run for one series, and the premise behind it all is basically that you've got this one character named Saitama. He lives in this place that's constantly under attack by like gigantic creatures, like horrible earth-shaking monsters that test the strength of any living man. And the idea is that it's something similar to like Dragon Ball Z. Like, for example, like Dragon Ball Z, they have their villain of the year, or whatever. Like, every year a new, bigger, badder villain shows up. It started off, and it was like Raditz, and like Raditz wasn't really a threat to the world. I mean, he kind of could have been, but he wasn't that big. And then the next villain came along, and it was Vegeta and Nappa. And they were stronger, but, like only so much stronger. And so Goku trained, and Goku got bigger. And they just kept, training to fight stronger and stronger and stronger until they were blowing up planets, and there was no real sense of scale anymore. The premise of One Punch Man is that the main character, Saitama, is already basically on that godlike level. And that's it. There's basically nothing else for him to do. So the whole thing is actually supposed to be like a comedy. Like, it's not really meant to be taken too seriously. Everything's got like a pinch of salt and a little bit of tongue-in-cheek sort of nature to it. But it's a fun ride, because what the anime does is it makes fun of a lot of really popular tropes in that sort of setting. And it really knows what they are, and it handles them pretty well. In fact, a lot of the show isn't really about Saitama. I think maybe like the first 3 or so episodes are just Saitama, and just establishing that he is so powerful that he can crush just about anything, and that he's also rather bored. Because the villains have class rankings, and the monsters are like, this is a god-ranked monster, and this is a dragon-ranked monster, and so they're all kind of given a certain amount of scaling. And that scaling is important because throughout the anime, Saitama, he meets these other heroes who all have these aspirations to basically become Saitama. Like, every single one of them wants to be the One Punch Man. And one of the first ones that he meets who sticks around is this cyborg named Genos, who then becomes his sidekick, and sort of the guy that grounds everything and makes it clear how ridiculous and over the top Saitama really is. So Genos starts asking Saitama, like, tell me about your backstory, tell me about this. Like, Genos has already got this interesting backstory. He's a young guy, his whole village was killed, and then he was rescued and transformed into a cyborg by this researcher, and so now he's on the hunt for this cyborg that killed his family or his village or whatever. He's going to kill this cyborg in revenge. And any time that Genos gets in a fight throughout the anime, you find that Genos is getting absolutely thrashed, hence we made fun of the fact in the One Punch Man parody that we did. And Genos gets really curious about Saitama, and he's just like, what did you do? Like, how did you get so strong? Like, what kind of training do you do? Like, how do you acquire all this power? And so Saitama explains, like, well, you know, I worked out for 3 years, and now I can, you know, punch the universe in half. So his story doesn't make any sense. Like, Saitama's he just had this weird, like, power jump. And again, if you go back and you look at Dragon Ball Z, which is easily the most popular example for this sort of thing, you notice that Goku was that same way, where like Goku would start off at sort of a reasonable grounding, and his power just kept escalating exponentially. And so the same kind of goes with Saitama. He's got that magical main character thing that allowed him to just get exponentially stronger. So sort of, you know, the joke is that he just worked out for 3 years. So by the end of this 3-year training stint, you know, he was on the very top. And so nobody else can possibly wrap their heads around this, because everyone else is a more fleshed out sort of hero. Everybody else is kind of more grounded. They've got these backstories. They came from places. Their power arises from something. Genos is powerful because he's a cyborg. So all of his power comes from technology. You know, like this brilliant scientist gives him these add-ons. You know, his heart is powered by like a fusion reaction core, stuff like that. His arm becomes a laser cannon. It's all based on this thing, and there's an upper limit to how much power Genos can really have. Genos is actually established to be one of the stronger people in the entire setting. Like he winds up being a Class S ranked hero, which is like as high as you can go. And as far as the Class S rankings go, he's actually up there. He's pretty solid. Like, he's a solid Class S. And speaking of, well, I'll get into that. The ranking system thing is actually really amusing, because at first it seems arbitrary, but then they start to flesh it out. And they use it a lot to sort of characterize all the different heroes. And so there's heroes at every level of this thing. Like, there's the Class C heroes, and the Class C heroes are not very good. Like, they apprehend purse snatchers and like drug dealers and, you know, just criminals that you would see on the streets. And these guys all have kind of like, they're like everyman sort of heroes. And some of them are actually the most endearing, because they really don't have a lot going for them. And they ride around the city, and they're kind of like cops. They just try to keep the city sanitized from petty criminals. So you get to know these guys a little bit, and kind of their level, like where they operate in society and what they mean and how they're important. And they're actually, a lot of them are pretty nice guys. Some of them are dicks. Not all of them are nice guys, but they're a little bit inspiring. Their stories are kind of fun, and it's nice. And then you've got the Class B heroes, which really kind of get glossed over. I'm not really sure what they do, because I haven't seen the comic. The Class A guys are like, I don't know, a buffer before Class B. I think the Class A guys are, I don't know, they handle things that are dangerous, but more like on a local level, you know, like if a demon gets out and it threatens to destroy a town, well, like a Class A hero could stop that. But something that could destroy a city, you know, you would send the Class S guys to go deal with that. And something that would destroy a city, that would be like dragon-ranking monsters. Something that could destroy the world would be god-ranking monsters. So, of course, as you're going through the anime, you get escalating higher and higher levels of monster that keep showing up. And Genos keeps going to go fight them, and every time he does, he gets utterly thrashed. But as they do this, they set it up in a way that actually really establishes how strong Genos is, and how strong the monsters are in comparison to Genos. And it makes the stakes feel very high. In a lot of fiction, you get what's called the Worf effect, where you have a character and a show wants to establish, like they say, like Worf from Star Trek was the battle guy, right? And so he was a Klingon, he was supposed to be very skilled at combat, and so when they wanted to prove that someone was a dangerous threat, they would go and they would attack Worf, and they would defeat Worf. And like, if they could defeat Worf really easily, then they were a really dangerous enemy. And the trouble was, they kept doing this to Worf so frequently that eventually it got to where, like, Worf never won any battles. Like, he didn't come across as a very strong hero anymore, a very strong warrior anymore, because he lost so many fights that it just became clear that Worf was like, you know, a little fish, like big fish in a little pond. Like, in the ocean of the universe, Worf was basically nobody. But One Punch Man actually manages to avoid this pretty well. by I don't know exactly how they do it, but I would think it would be just from the simple power displays that Genos puts out. Like, he's got weapons that can annihilate, you know, some pretty big things. Like, he fights with a meteor at one point and puts on a really impressive show. But he still gets thrashed. He gets thrashed in every fight that he goes into. So there's a good job of keeping Genos established as an incredibly powerful fighter, and then squashing him. And the way that they always do it, like, his scenes are intense, the animation is really good. Like, Genos comes across as clever and fast and smart and powerful. But, like, he might get defeated by something, you know, like a kid will be in danger, and Genos will do something to try and to save the kid. And doing this throws him off his guard, and he gets beaten. So he winds up getting swept aside, not necessarily from lacking strength, but by having too big of a heart or something like that. And so they keep it seeming like he's an effective hero, while still defeating him and kind of showing like, oh, the stakes are really high, these monsters are really powerful. And then of course Saitama comes up and he just goes, oh, hey, who are you? And the monster starts to go on its monologue, and it's like, I am the mighty so-and-so, descended from so-and-so. I will now punch you with the force of 1,000 stars. And Saitama just punches the monster's head off, and that's the episode. It wraps up like that. You know, Saitama is the Deus Ex Machina. He descends from the sky, and at the end of every episode, he kills a monster. So just like this, you actually wind up with a bit of social stuff being more of your core conflict, but not all the time. By having Saitama take his bench and letting the other guys do things, these Class C heroes handle things in their way, or Genos handling his things in his way for a while, you let them kind of escalate, and they build up as characters, and you get kind of attached to all these little side people, you know, like this guy on the bicycle. You get to like him because you see him running around trying to do his bicycle thing, and he's just so proud of it. Like, he's just so proud of his bicycle thing. Like, he wants to be the best bicycle-based vigilante in the entire city, and damn it, he puts his heart to it. Like, every single morning he wakes up, he looks in the mirror, and he goes, I am the bicycle vigilante. And he goes and he kills, well, I don't know if he kills anyone, but he goes and he fights crime. He goes and he fights crime. He kills the spirit of crime. Crime says, I don't want to go to crime today. I'm gonna just be punched by a man on a bicycle. But anyway, though, so the anime, it escalates. Like, every single thing that they fight is stronger than the thing before it. And so they keep on going, they ramp up and up and up and up. So you start off and you fight like these terrestrial creatures, you know, these things that are like strong in a way that you can comprehend. And then you start going into like, you know, from the very deeps, you know, and it becomes something more like Cthulhu-style monsters, like things that rise up, like, we've been asleep for 1,000 years, now I'm waking up to eradicate the world. And eventually you get stuff coming in from space. And it's like, you know, I'm the strongest thing from the outer reaches of the so-and-so nebula, stuff like that. And all the way through, of course, Saitama is able to just punch them all to death. And it's all anticlimax, the whole thing. But because it's comedy, though, because it's a comedy, and because it's a parody, and it's very, very self-aware, like, I really can't emphasize how much it doesn't feel like a big disappointment. It doesn't feel very samey. And plus, the anime actually goes through, and the first season ends in enough time to not wear out its welcome. So it's one of those animes that gets a real good impression, runs through, it's fun, it's good to watch, and then it ends, and you're still really endeared to all the characters. You're not like, oh man, I wish that they had ended that a season ago. The first season is really strong, and it ends on a good note, and you know, it's a lot of fun. It's all a little bit weird. Like, I would say it's fun to get into, but I don't know how much you could really look into the setting and then really extrapolate a lot of sense from it, because it feels like very much of it is arbitrary, intentionally. But that's because, you know, like, all of City A may get destroyed in one fell swoop to demonstrate how strong something is, and you know, you can't really make sense of a world where entire cities get wiped off the map arbitrarily just to prove a monster is strong. The Class S guys are the ones that get brought up more frequently. Not all of them are quite like that, but they're all interesting. There's an old man who's like super good at karate, basically. It's not really karate, it's like his ancient family's traditional fighting style, but it's basically just, you know, karate. Then there's there's a guy with a baseball bat and a pompadour. I rather like him. If only because I really like the style. I just like the idea that a guy with a baseball bat is like the top ranking, like, oh man, when God threatened the world, you call this dude with the baseball bat to come and hit that thing with a baseball bat. Then of course you got the samurai guy, because this is Japanese entertainment. Of course, you know, samurai has to be Class S. A good samurai does anyway. Samurai just runs around chopping everything. Another fun one, though, is Pretty Pretty Prisoner. And Pretty Pretty Prisoner is a man who is in prison for some fairly legitimate reasons. And every now and then when there's something truly serious going on, he breaks out of prison and he goes and he punches that thing. An interesting character. I don't think that he could actually survive as an anime on his own. I might be wrong. I mean, like, maybe as a niche sort of comic book thing, he could be amusing. But you know, a fun character all the same. Who else? Oh, there's a guy who pilots these drones, and this is actually pretty cool. He builds these like drone robot things with all kinds of weapons on them. And it reminds me a little bit of some animes that I've seen, you know, where people have like you know, robots that they ride around in, and the robots are like highly customizable, so they like have a fortress base or whatever like that. It's like, oh, swatch out my arm with a laser cannon. I've got to use lasers on this thing. Oh, put missiles on the back. Throw on the heavy armor deal. You know, I'm gonna be slow but dangerous. There were some animes that did that I thought were pretty cool, and that's what this guy reminds me of. Metal Knight is what his name of. Metal Knight. His name is Metal Knight. Who else is there? Oh, and of course, then there's like this little witch girl who's like, she appears to be like 14, but I think she's much older than that because of some kind of weird supernatural thing. But yeah, fun characters, fun show, good parody. I recommend checking it out. Some people looked at our parody and they saw that as like reinforcement of like, oh man, you know, like One Punch Man must be dumb. I don't really want to check it out. But actually, no, it's a pretty good show. It's a good parody. I mean, like if you're up for that sort of thing, if you really like the formula. Well, actually, if you really like the formula it's making fun of, you'll probably really enjoy it. If you really find that to be very dull in the first place, maybe you won't. I don't know. It's comical, but it's got some really good action sequences. It's got good pacing. Like, the jokes are pretty solid. I like the relationship between Genos and Saitama. It cracks me up, their platonic relationship. Since we posted that, or actually, I believe it was the day after we posted that parody, there was an OVA that came out. And it's super strongly hinted that there's a certain amount of man love between Saitama and Genos. I mean, they don't come out and say it, but you could certainly infer that. The fangirls who think that maybe Saitama and Genos are like into each other, they may not be totally wrong. I mean, that's another thing that they're aware of the tropes. They may very well be baiting that intentionally. So that's fun. But it's a fun anime. I recommend giving it a shot. If you ever have the chance to watch it, you probably ought to sit down and do it. Give it at least until Genos becomes sort of acclimated to Saitama. I guess about like halfway in. If you watch it about halfway and you don't enjoy it by then you know, I suppose that's it. But I think a lot of people that get into it after a couple episodes, you know, you start to realize the whole thing is silly, but also fun. And I don't know. It was a good anime. We thought we'd do a parody of it. We'll do parodies of more stuff coming forward. I don't know for sure what exactly. Like I said, we've been discussing some things. I know that Gravity Falls is due to conclude at the end of this month. I don't know if we'd be able to get something out at that time, but I can think of some jokes that I can make about Bill. Man, Bill came out and like Bill. They built up Bill for an awfully long time, didn't they? I mean, like, what's interesting is if you were a really big fan of Gravity Falls, like, they were doing Bill Cipher Reddit stuff like that. You know, ask me anything on Bill Cipher. I believe that Alex Hirsch or somebody was also going around posing as Bill. I mean, like, I remember on Picardo we used to have this guy coming in, and his screen name was like Bill Cipher, and then he would say like a couple of bizarre cryptic things, and then just would leave. Like, and so I always wondered. I was like, yeah, you know, I've heard that they use that character to actually promote Gravity Falls. Do you suppose that was the guy? And everyone, you know, it's kind of like, this probably wasn't the guy. I don't think that Alex Hirsch would go from like stream to stream, would he? Would that be like a waste of time? Maybe he just does it for fun. Yeah, no, but anyway, Bill Cipher. He's also got his own Twitter, I believe. Bill Cipher does, but they built up Bill Cipher quite a lot. And while it's been a fun show, I think that Gravity Falls. Well, I won't give it away. If we do a parody, maybe I'll talk about Gravity Falls in the future. If we do a parody of it, I don't want to give away the joke right now. But yeah. Anyway, One Punch Man. It's fun. I recommend it. You should check it out. I suppose that'll be it for today. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.